In case you're wondering, this is under the hood server performance. We are going to get started because I have lots of slides and I don't talk as fast as Andrew Cates, but I need to try and get through all this. My name is Jon Thatcher. I'm a senior architect at FileMaker. I report to the VP of development, mainly work on the database server and the Draco engine. I've been at FileMaker for 28 years now. I've been joking, I've been training my replacement for 24 years now. His name is Clay, he's sitting over there. he's actually been at FileMaker more than 30 years. So I actually started on Queris Resolved and started working on FileMaker Pro in 1993. And then Clay and I together created the first FileMaker Server and shipped that in 1994 and shipped many versions. And then I became a manager around 97, 96, and we created the Draco database engine starting in late 1997. And it went further up and became a director of engineering and managed the teams that developed Pro and Server 7 and shipped those on top of the Draco engine. After Server 8, I realized I loved being an engineer. And so I switched back. I went from manager back to being an engineer, and I've been doing that since. So that's about me. What are we, I want to point out some of the things that we're gonna, you might be able to talk to, see other sessions on server and performance. Oddly, a couple of them are happening right nearby. Unfortunately, my phone and my remote are not in sync here. So here are other sessions on server and performance. I highly recommend that you check those out if you were not able to see the ones yesterday. And then I'm looking forward to the one that John Howell is going to do right after mine in this room on top call statistics. So my agenda. I'm going to try and talk about Server 16 under the hood and actually a little bit more broadly about the platform, things that have changed. I'm going to talk about temporary files, caching, and perform script on server, and then finally what I'm calling FileMaker performance truths. So let's start with multiple web publishing engines. First, I'm going to talk about the architecture, the improved scalability, and how it works. Sorry, if you don't use WebDirect, the next 7 or 8 slides, you can take a little nap. I won't be too upset. Of course, I should also ask, why aren't you using WebDirect? It's very cool. So here's the architecture diagram for web publishing in Server 15. And it's pretty simple. We've got the one machine configuration on top. The top half of the slide, you see the dashed box. All of our processes, the web components, and the database server are all on one machine. And then the two machine is really simple. We just sort of split it at about the 2/3 point. Web stuff on one machine. You can have a firewall in the middle, and then database server on the master machine. So, simple. Web publishing on one side, database server on the other machine. It's limited though. Only 100 WebDirect clients, and obviously not scalable. So here's the similar diagram for Server 16. The single machine case is pretty much exactly the same as in 15. So I'm just showing the multiple machine case. And you'll notice there are a couple of differences. On the master machine, we still have the web server and web publishing engine on the master machine, unlike the Server 15 case. The PHP engine I've got circled there on your left is only on the master machine. And then on the firewall, because we're doing more communication from the workers to the master, port 16,000 now needs to be open in the firewall, which was not necessarily the case before. And then I noted, hopefully you can read that, knowledge base article 16319 is the Bible for ports used by Server 16. Has the full list of all the ports that need to be available or open for all the processes. So the big thing this gets us, and I didn't really show it, is we can have multiple worker machines now in Server 16. That gives us improved scalability. We tested up to 5 worker machines, hint, hint. Maximum of 100 WebDirect clients on each worker. So 5 times 100, we tested a maximum of 500 WebDirect clients. How many you can use obviously depends on your license. As I pointed out, the new thing is that the web server and WPE, web publishing engine, also exist on the master machine. And the master redirects work. As a new WebDirect client comes in, it talks to one of the worker machines. The master will actually redirect that client to the worker that has the fewest clients. The master does continue to handle all of the XML, PHP, ODBC, JDBC, and FileMaker Data API requests. Oh, actually there's a thing I do have speaker notes, so I encourage you to download my slides if you haven't already. There are more details in the speaker notes. One thing I wanted to point out here is that, as I mentioned, the PHP engine is only on the master. So if you've got people outside the firewall who can only talk to the worker machines, the workers basically act as a proxy for the XML and PHP activity. They just act as a proxy to the master. That does mean that you will have to have port 80 and or 443 open on your firewall just so that that communication can take place. And unfortunately, due to the HSTS security protocol, I don't think that we support alternate ports. If you're trying to use those, that's not going to work with, particularly with XML and PHP. And then finally, PHP does require extra effort. If you have non-PHP files that you're using in your custom web publishing, you're going to have to copy those. So you have JavaScript or PNG files or whatever that are part of your PHP solution. You're going to have to copy those from the master onto each of the worker machines. Otherwise, your clients aren't going to be able to get access to them. All right. So how does this redirect thing work? Basically, the master tracks how many WebDirect clients each of the worker machines currently has. When a new WebDirect client comes in, it contacts one of the worker machines. That's based on how you have your DNS server set up. So say I've got 4 worker machines and they're all set up to under the name jon.filemaker.com. And so the 4 IP addresses for those workers, or maybe they're worker1.filemaker.com, worker2.filemaker.com, they're all assigned to the jon.filemaker.com by my DNS server. So when a WebDirect client contacts jon.filemaker.com, they get randomly, or maybe round robin, assigned randomly one of those 4 worker machines to talk to. That all happens due to the DNS. That's outside of FileMaker. When they contact that worker, it's going to ask the master, hey, which one of the WPEs should get this work? The master says, okay, the one with the fewest clients wins. That may be the same one they're already talking to. So the client may just talk to the same WPE. The WPE accepts the request and opens a session for that WebDirect client, and that session stays on that worker machine for that client until they log out. Now, if they're redirected, the master says, oh, you need to talk to a different worker machine. The client gets back a redirect URL, and the client actually talks to that other worker machine using the new IP address it got in the URL. And it goes through the same thing. It goes and it talks to that new WPE and creates its session there, and their session stays there until they log out. And I want to make clear, there's only one level of redirect. And unfortunately, I want to hold questions to the end if possible. Hopefully I'll answer them as we answer them in future slides, but have too much to cover. But I hopefully leave about 10 minutes at the end for questions. All right, so again, the master just keeps redirecting requests to all the workers. So what happens when you get up to that limit of 100 on each of your WebDirect worker machines? If you get to that point and all the workers have 100 WebDirect clients, then the master is also a worker. It has a web publishing engine. It will redirect work to itself. Of course, that may not work in your configuration. If the master is inside the firewall and the workers are outside the firewall, you may not allow that traffic to the master machine. So in that case, they may get a server unavailable error. If you want to avoid that, you can potentially turn off the WPE on the master. Of course, the downside of that is you would lose XML and PHP. So you may not want to do that. Just letting you know that's a possibility. And then, of course, the really nice thing about having multiple worker machines is that you can spread out what may be really heavy-duty client work across multiple machines. And particularly with 16, we've got print PDF. If your WebDirect clients are creating PDF reports, that's pretty heavy load. And you may find that, hey, I have a license for 200 WebDirect clients. I want to have all 5 worker machines. So I will never have more than 40 WebDirect clients on any one of those workers, just because a whole bunch of them are doing PDF simultaneously, and I need that horsepower. All right, so now moving on to some other performance changes in 16, some things specific to WebDirect. We improved thread and socket pools for the communication we have internally. This means that we don't have to create and destroy threads or sockets every time someone connects. We just create them once, put them in a pool, then take them out as needed, put them back in the pool, and it's very quick. This actually fixed some performance problems we had on Windows where the sockets were very slow to get cleaned up sometimes. Took even a minute or two to clean up a socket. We also did some work to optimize portal and related set handling. And some of you may have noticed we're now using native HTML for the Launch Center and the login dialog. It's native HTML. It doesn't actually use the Vaadin architecture that WebDirect does. And that means there's less load on the web publishing engine. Just because we're using native HTML, everything can happen locally on the client. Another thing we tried to do in 16 is allow client-side auto-sizing when the browser window is resized. So instead of having to make trips back to the server to figure out the layout of the, what the client needs to display where based on the new window size, hopefully that can happen locally. There is a huge list of requirements for this. For example, it has to be in form view, no navigation bar, no on layout size change script trigger, and various limits about where the layout objects are anchored and how they resize. All that is in my speaker notes, so please refer to that. Other more across the platform changes in 16. In 15, you may remember, we talked about this last year, FileMaker Pro started reusing the temporary file. If you're reconnecting to the file you previously had open on a server, we now keep the temporary file on the local hard drive so the FileMaker Pro client can reuse it the next time they open that same file on that same server. This is a really huge win for performance and reopening databases that you use frequently. Unfortunately, there are a few things we forgot in 15 that we realized kept getting re-downloaded even though they were in the temporary file. And that's the table occurrence, and relationship catalogs. So those are now, we remember that those are in the temporary file and reuse those. And depending on how complicated those are, that can save a second or more of opening time on complicated databases. We also did some work to improve the speed of catalogs when you've got hundreds or thousands of members, like layouts or scripts or other things that are in catalogs, field definitions. And in particular, we saw that this speeds up portals where you're using a recursive calculation in the sort order. We also optimize some cases of the database design report creation, and we download some more items in the background so you don't have to wait in the main application. More performance changes. We reduced round trips with file uploading, sped up secure progressive downloading, and you're probably aware the Draco engine and much of FileMaker Pro Server and Go uses the C++ programming language. We keep updating our code to use more of the new programming language standards. So using C++ 11 new features and even some of the C++ 14 new features. And what that gets us is better optimization by the compilers. So this is something you will only see in terms of better performance of just everyday operations. It also means one thing we do is we're using more efficient and safer data structures that they're providing in the standard libraries so that it's harder for us to create programming issues like running out of memory or overflowing memory buffers, all those things you hear about that can cause crashes. Of course, we do also use other languages. We use Swift and Objective-C on Go, and actually some on FileMaker Pro. We use C# some for Windows-specific code. And then, of course, on the web side, we heavily use Java and JavaScript. So, on to the second part, and I'm a little bit behind already. Perform script on server. I'm going to talk about how it works, how it differs from other types of FileMaker scripting, and performance considerations. So, how it works, hopefully most of you know this already. I'm going to try and highlight a couple of things you may not have realized. It's pretty simple. The client just tells the server to run a named script with some specified parameters. The script is run by the same FMSE process as the server-side FileMaker Script schedules. You may hear me say SASE or FMSASE. That's the same thing. Actually, the process is named FMSASE on Windows or FMSASE-D on Mac. It's all the same thing, that script execution process on the server. Those PSOS clients, I say PSOS, perform script on server, they show up as clients in the admin console. You can disconnect them. If you want that script to end, you can just disconnect that script client from the admin console to get it to stop. And one thing you may not be aware of, but you can get the exceeds host capacity error if a client says, perform this script, and they're already the maximum number of script sessions running on your server. And you will get that error whether you say wait for completion or not. You should also get that error if for some reason the FMSE process isn't running on your server. Then finally, this is a little bit tricky, but the account that the PSOS script runs with is the one for the client who has started the PSOS. It's the account that they used to log in to the PSOS target scripts database. So if you've got two files, file A and file B, and the client, normally you'll use the same account for both, right? But there might be some cases where the client logged in separately to file B and they've got a different account B versus account A, right, in the first file. So which account gets used for PSOS? So they're running a script in file A and it says perform script on server, script from file B. Well, it's the file B account that is going to get used by the perform script on server account to open up file B on the server, log in, and perform the script, that target script for PSOS. It's a little detail, but something that you may run into. So how does PSOS differ from Pro, Go, and WebDirect? it obviously ignores any of, or doesn't support sometimes, the UI-related steps related to Windows and zooming and things like that. It's the same set of supported steps as the server-side script schedules. PSOS target script cannot call PSOS. For one thing, we were a little bit concerned about the security issues of, I just explained, PSOS has to use the client's account when it starts up and opens its database. Well, if PSOS could do another PSOS, well, it's like another, opening another security hole potentially, because it would be copying that account information another time. So we didn't necessarily want to go in that direction. And then we also figured, this would be way too easy a way to start your own script under PSOS and basically use up all of the sessions very quickly and hurt your server performance. So I know some of you really want to do this, but right now you can't. And the other important point, of course, is that FMSE process is on this master machine. It's on the same machine as the database server, and so there's no network overhead. So that's one reason that FMSE doing PSOS can be much faster than you're running the same script on Pro or Go. So how is PSOS the same? It runs the on first window open and on last window close script triggers. It can open related databases on the same server as needed, though note that it cannot open databases that are on other servers. It's only on the same server. And every PSOS script that's run is a new client with its own temporary files. I'm going to talk about this some more. So it's important to realize that unlike Pro and Go, when you do perform script on Pro and Go, they've got temporary files, and when you finish running that script on Pro or Go, well, you're still logged in, the script ended, but all your temporary files are still open. You're still attached to the database unless you close them. Perform script on server isn't like that. It has to clean everything up when that script ends. And so anything that's downloaded into a temporary file gets deleted when that script ends. So some of you may recall this slide from 2014. So this is showing temporary files and how clients use temporary files. On the top, we've got the database server, or actually the server in general, and you can see it's got the main database, and it reads and writes data from the main database into RAM. And for each database, the server actually has a temporary file of its own for each main database. Then over the network, it is communicating, in this case with FileMaker Pro Advanced, but could be any client, transferring data over the network, because almost always these are different machines. So that dashed line is indicating a network, the host machine on the top, client machine on the bottom. And the client has its own RAM, and for every hosted database, it has a temporary file that it downloads its data into. So how is it different for PSOS? Well, it's pretty much identical. The only difference is that we're on the same machine. The top part above the dashed line is the database server process, and below is the FMSE process. And you may have noticed I also changed the labels on the RAM. So the top is the database server's process RAM, and below is FMSE process RAM. So there's a big difference here. That RAM for those two processes is from the same pool of physical RAM of one machine. And I'll talk about that some more as we go forward. So the temporary file actually gets used exactly the same way with PSOS as it does for other clients. Step number one, the PSOS client wants to operate on some records. It downloads them from the main database, from the database server into the temp file for FMSE. Your script makes some changes, and I put little red borders around the records to indicate they were modified. So when the commit record step occurs, those records are going to be committed to the host, right? Well, what actually happens is they get moved. The FMSE process says commit. Well, they get copied from the FMSE temp file to the temp file on the server, the database server process. The same temp file that matches the hosted database. We don't upload directly into the hosted file ever. Then the third step, once the upload is complete, only after the upload is totally complete into the database server's temp file does it actually do the final commit to the hosted database. So in this way, the FMSE process is just like the other clients, a Pro or Go client over the network. We don't want to have any chance of corruption by, the FMSE process dying somehow partway through the transmission of the data up to the server. So it always uploads to the temp file, and only the database server does the real commit into the hosted database. Now, this is a distillation of probably 5 or 6 slides that Clay showed last year in his session. He had 7 steps to open a file. Well, you add it all up, this is the list of stuff that the PSOS client has to download when it opens a database. Each time it runs and opens a database, it has to download this whole list of stuff. The tables, the table occurrences, the relationship graph, the initial layout definition. And for that layout, it has to download the theme, the field definition for that layout's table, and then the record IDs, what we call the master record list for that layout's table. In value lists, font ID mapping, custom menus, it has to download all that stuff. And then as needed, PSOS is also going to download records, that it's operating on or sorting or whatever it's doing. Those would be minus the containers. But of course, maybe your PSOS script actually is manipulating containers. Maybe it has to, if you're printing a PDF or something, it has to download a whole container or thumbnails or whatever in order to do the print. So there's a lot of stuff that it may have to download. It may have to download scripts. If the PSOS script goes to a different layout or goes to a related record and ends up on a different layout or table, it may have to download the layout definition and, of course, then all of the field definitions for that table, that layout's table. So I have a note here, watch out for a PSOS script that is switching to different layouts. Make sure that that's what you need it to do. If you're using the same script for Pro and Go and PSOS, you may want to think about, well, could I simplify this a little bit so my PSOS client doesn't have to switch layouts and download all this extra stuff into its temporary file that's just going to get thrown away when the PSOS client ends. So, besides that one, here's some more PSOS performance considerations. Again, your on first window open and on last window close script triggers, those may be for things that only the UI clients care about, right? You may be setting up things, doing stuff with Windows or Zoom or whatever. Well, you need to skip those particular steps, but maybe you could just skip the whole thing if you know that it's PSOS. That would lower the overhead of each time PSOS is run. Again, because of that master record list, think about it. If you've got a table, so your initial layout that your PSOS client goes to is, that initial layout is on a table that has 1 million records in it. Now, 1 million records isn't all that much, but that means the PSOS client has to download the master record list for that table. We use what's called a record ID bitmap, so we only use 1 bit per record. So it's not like we download 7 or 8 megabytes for that master record list. If it's 1 million records, we download about 1 million bits, but still that's 128K bytes that gets downloaded every time that PSOS script runs. Could you go to a different layout instead? Could you use a different layout as the initial layout for your PSOS client? And again, if you're going to a really complicated layout that has portals and lots of related fields, and your PSOS client is moving through records, it may be doing queries or joins to get all that related data that your your script really never uses. There may be a huge amount of overhead due to the relationships that your PSOS client is totally wasted on. So you may want to use a simplified layout for your PSOS clients. And then I mentioned PSOS shares RAM and CPU and actually disk space with the database server. So, because the FMSC process is on the same machine, it is sharing all those resources with the database server that is truly doing all the work for all the different clients. And because they're separate processes, that means they are potentially competing for the same CPU cores, right? If one of your clients can start up 25 or 100 PSOS clients because you're using asynchronous PSOS, your client is not waiting for completion, well, you could bring down the performance of your whole server for everybody because there's suddenly 100 PSOS clients trying to use your 8 cores in your CPU, and everybody else is temporarily left high and dry. I actually talked with a developer last night who said that he's actually set up server schedules. He's got what he calls 4 worker schedules that he just, client creates a record in a table, and that schedule picks it up and does the work, and sometimes he can actually split the work across 2 or 3 workers. If he's got 10,000 records to work on, he'll give, the first 3,300 to worker 1, second 3,300 to worker 2, et cetera. And he said, and what I discovered is 3 workers is really good. If I tried to use 5 workers for that, it would not help because I didn't have that beefy CPU. If I tried to have 5 workers running simultaneously, it would really just sort of swamp the CPU and he wouldn't get as much work done. It was better to have fewer workers. So my recommendation here is don't go wild with asynchronous PSOS. And Jon Howell actually talked about this last year during his session. He may talk about it again in his upcoming session right after mine. But this is really important. I mean, PSOS is great. Please use it. But just, don't go wild and hurt the performance of your whole server by abusing it. And like I said, you can actually use a FileMaker Server script schedule to do work instead of having a PSOS client do it. And Jon talked about this last year a bit. I think it's really critical to realize it may be much more efficient for you to create a work queue table and your client create a record in that work queue table that a server script just occasionally, maybe runs once a minute or something, picks up all the records from that work queue table and processes them using one schedule. So think about it. If you have 100 clients, well, it's pretty quick for them to create 100 records, right? But if instead those 100 clients each called PSOS to say send an email from the server side, well, you're creating 100 threads and you're creating 100 temp files and then destroying those temp files and destroying those threads to send your 100 emails. If you put that work into a work queue table, though, you can have one server schedule, which is one thread, do 100 emails. That's a whole lot more efficient. So I strongly encourage using this method. All right, so third part, I'm about a minute or 2 behind here. So this is actually a slide from my session last year, and I strongly encourage you to look at my slides, and I'm including them with the stuff that I have posted for this year. So you can get my slides from last year, and actually I included Clay's slides too in my download. You can see some really important stuff about when and how to optimize, using server features like top call statistics to identify performance issues, and then some performance do's and don'ts. So I'm not gonna repeat all that stuff. You can just look at it online. Instead, I'm gonna talk about what I call FileMaker performance truths. And maybe I'll even explain that little thing about what the heck is a a hierarchical tree. So, first one, FileMaker caches everything. As you saw in those slides, the database server has the database RAM cache and a temporary file for every hosted database. So when the server reads data from the disk, it's going into that database RAM cache, and it stays in the RAM cache until it's discarded for some reason. So a client may actually delete the record, and so it just gets deleted, or other data has to be read from disk into the cache. The cache is full, so the least recently used data has to get discarded, after it's been flushed to disk, of course. But the data gets discarded and new data gets read into the RAM. So the thing to do is to try and set your database RAM cache size to what I would call the working set of your solution. You want your server to be able to use that RAM cache really efficiently. And so if you've got, the thing is, it totally depends on your solution and how your users are working with it. So you may have just one big file on your server. You could have a 10 gigabyte database on your server. But because your users are doing reports that use all of that data, all 10 gigabytes of data, they're doing reports all the time, or who knows, they're adding and modifying records all the time across that whole 10 gigabyte database. Well, the working set for that server might be 10 gigabytes. It might be the whole size of that one database. So it might make sense in that case to set your database RAM cache in the server admin console to 10 gigabytes of RAM if you have that much physical RAM to support it. But there could also be a completely different sort of solution. Someone might have terabytes worth of databases on their server, but very little of it is used on a day-to-day basis. So you could have terabytes worth of files on disk, but your users may only use a teeny tiny bit of it day to day. They may only use 1 gigabyte of it, right? It totally depends on your solution and what people are doing with it. So in that case, you might be able to set your database RAM cache to just 1 gigabyte. So I did talk about this some last year, but the thing to look at is the cache hit percentage in the server statistics. You want to keep that at 100% if at all possible. And you can play around with it. I wouldn't suggest changing it all the time, but the server should handle changing it dynamically. Another thing that server caches is thumbnails of containers. And this is actually a pretty huge performance benefit, because it used to be that the clients many years ago, if you had a really huge image in a container field, the client would download the whole image, and the client would do the work to create a thumbnail to display in, say, like a 128 by 128 pixel field on the layout. That was really wasteful, particularly if it was like a 4 megapixel image, right? So now, and for several years now, the server creates the thumbnails, and it will actually cache that thumbnail. So the server will create that 128 by 128 thumbnail and save it for up to a day in case some other user needs a similar sized thumbnail for that same container image. The client has a file cache and temporary files, of course. Only the Pro client can set the file cache to use more RAM. When the client downloads data, of course, it goes first into RAM and then gets written to the temporary file as needed. It may get flushed out of the client's RAM if the database, if its file cache isn't big enough, and have to get read from the temporary file again. And of course, the client also caches thumbnails and external containers that it downloads. So there's lots of caching going on. And we do it for performance. So we don't have to keep downloading things over the network, which could be really bad if you're on an iPad or iPhone. So because we download all that stuff into the temporary files, free disk space can be an issue. One thing I should point out in particular is reusing temporary files on the client. Well, remember, we now save, we don't delete those when you quit Pro in the hopes that the next time you open that file on server, you'll be able to reuse that temporary file. But we had to decide somewhere, when is that file likely to be stale? So we just made the decision, 21 days is the limit. If the temporary file is 21 days or older, and we see it when we are opening up a server database, we're just going to throw it away and create a whole new temporary file.
John, is there a way to flush that or debug it?
Unfortunately, you have to do that manually, and you're getting ahead of me. It's okay. So obviously, low disk space on a client can hurt performance. If the client gets critically low, FileMaker Pro and Go for that matter, if there's less than 250 megabytes of free space, the client will start purging data out of those temporary files so that it gets back above that limit. Client will also discard external container data immediately after it's used if the free space is below 2 gigabytes on the desktop or less than 1 gigabyte on iOS. And the thing to realize is that without free disk space for the temporary files, that means the client is going to have to re-download data over and over again, potentially. If they're doing a big report or a big sort, they may end up re-downloading the same record multiple times. So if you've got a client that says, hey, I'm doing this big report, and this is horribly slow, and they're the only one in the office complaining about it, go look at their machine and see how much free disk space they have. It might turn out that they have very little free disk space, and so they're re-downloading data over and over and over again, whereas no one else is. And that same client, you may want to check and see in their FileMaker Pro preferences, can you increase their file cache size? They may be working on a gigabyte of downloaded records, doing a sort or doing a report. They could set their file cache to a gigabyte of RAM. That would also help their performance. So as I have been saying here, the client can download a huge amount of data into those temporary files, which is great because that means there's less network traffic. The client is doing tons of work locally, doesn't have to go back to the server. Especially great if they're doing multiple versions of report or multiple sorts. Do realize that on reopen, the client is going to have to check if all those cached downloaded records are stale or not. So the client does actually have to scan and collect the modification counts for every record in its temporary file, send it up to the server. The server then checks, oh, is this record up to date? Is this record up to date? And it sends back the bitmap with the record IDs that are stale. So this is one downside, and getting back to your question of having a huge temp file is on a reopen, it can take a little bit for the client to get back in sync. But still, that's hugely faster than them having to re-download all of that data again. So actually, I was going to ask for a show of hands. If we had a preference to have a limit on the temporary file size cache or the temporary file cache, like say maximum number of gigabytes in the temporary file cache. Would anybody like a preference? Raise your hand. Okay. So what about if we had a button in the Pro preferences to clear the temporary file cache? Would that be helpful? Oh boy, I see some big excitement on that. How about both? Yeah. So yeah, this was something that I'm on the server team. I put this in as a feature request in our bug database, saying we really should have a way of setting the limit or flushing the cache. But hopefully people have noticed that that this is a big request. Okay, so FileMaker reads and writes entire records. Another important truth. All fields of a record move together. You've heard this probably many times. Mark Richmond has talked about this a lot. All fields are downloaded and uploaded at once. Containers or thumbnails are only downloaded as needed. Containers are only going to be uploaded if you've added or modified or replaced data in the container. And the container upload is actually a separate remote call from the record commit. because the container data does not come down with the record data. Since all of the fields of a record move together, the more non-empty fields you have, obviously, per record, that means you're going to have a larger record size, which means a larger and slower download and upload if that record is changed by the client. Now, I talked about this some last year, this idea of wide tables versus narrow tables. This is especially bad if you've got a client on a slow network and they have to download these huge records with lots of text in one record. Horrible if you're doing this on an iOS device on 3G cellular network. So you may want to consider splitting tables that have hundreds of fields or fields with huge amounts of text that aren't used all that often in the main layout. You can move those fields into a related table, create a one-to-one relationship, and it'll be much faster for clients to use the narrower record in that main table than access via relationship those large text fields only when needed. Now you may have noticed I said more non-empty fields per record means larger record size. I saw a question about this actually on the community a week or two ago. Because FileMaker uses a tree structure, each record is a subtree in that overall tree structure, and each individual field is basically a leaf. Well, FileMaker basically treats the absence of that leaf as the field being empty. So, in other words, if a field is empty, it takes up 0 space in RAM or on disk in FileMaker. There's no point in splitting into narrow tables if all you're moving into the narrow table, into that related table, is a bunch of fields that are empty. Empty fields take up 0 space. There's no point in moving them around. Of course, you may not want to have them in your field definitions if they're empty all the time, but that's a different issue. So here's a slide that Clay showed last year of sort of the hierarchical tree file format. We're displaying it as more of the root and branches of roots coming out from it down below. Each one of the vertical white rectangles is a 4K block. In FileMaker, the Draco engine in particular is great at just grabbing the root of the tree and copying the whole thing, downloading it to a client, or uploading it back to the host. Or grabbing a subtree and all the nodes below it and doing the copy or delete or upload. So I wanted to dive a little bit more into that. If we go one level down from the root, there's a whole subtree just for layouts, whole subtree for scripts, for schema, for the data for table 1, for table 2, etc. So now I'm going to dive down again. We'll get table 1 data. We've got 3 records underneath our table 1 data. And you'll notice I've got 3 fields under record 1. I've got fields 3, 4, and 5. But under record 2, there's only 1 node. There's only 1 leaf. So field 5 is the only field that exists for record 2. And then I snuck in a repeating field, you may notice, under record 3. Field 22 there, it has repeats 6, 7, and 9 as the individual leaves. But those are the only ones that exist. Repeats 1 through 5 and repeat number 8, they aren't there. Those don't exist at all, right? So they take up 0 space. And in records 1 and 2, that repeating field, it's empty for those records, so there's 0 storage for that repeating field 22 in the other records. So what does this mean? This is actually why we must download the whole subtree, because the existence of those nodes is what tells us that those fields are non-empty. And the non-existence of fields is what says the field is empty, right? So we download that tree for record 1, we find fields 3, 4, and 5 underneath it, right? All that comes down at once to the client. And we know that there's no field 22 in record 1, right? And then upload, well, it's the same thing. We have to copy that whole subtree up to the host because, for example, say we're working on record 1, the client deleted field number 4. Well, so they're going to upload the tree for record 1. It only has nodes for field 3 and field 5 underneath it. That is the signal to the host that field 4 was deleted. And well, it's the field content for field 4 for record 1 is what got deleted. I'm talking about manipulating individual records here. And so the point is that we have to copy that whole subtree up because it's the existence of the node that tells server what to do. And in this case, if I had 3, 4, and 5 under record 1, and I upload only fields 3 and 5, that tells server, oh, they deleted field 4 for record 1. I have to go unindex all the data that was in field 4 for record 1 from the field index for field 4, right? So that node not being there in the tree is a signal to do extra work on the server side. And that is why we can't download partial records or upload partial records, just the fields that were changed, because it's the existence or non-existence of the nodes that's critical. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. So finally, every version has performance improvements. And I wanted to highlight this as a FileMaker truth because it is actually very important. There are some features that require that you have the latest version of the client and server to work together. In particular, in 15, reusing the temporary file, you had to have a Pro 15 client and server 15. Truncate table, also in 15. You had to have a 15 client and the 15 or later server for that feature to work. In addition, you should be aware that when we do our testing, we ship Pro, Go, and Server together. We are doing our testing with Pro and Go 16 against Server 16. Vast majority of the testing is done with 16 to 16. We do some testing with 15 clients to version 16. We do a little bit of testing with version 14 clients to a 16 server. But it's a lot less than we do with 16 to 16. So I encourage you to use the latest version of server and of course stay on the VREVs or the updates, the latest ones, and require that your clients use the matching version of your server. So use Pro and Go 16 with server 16. All right, that was it. This session, I believe I am going to update a slightly updated version of the slides, but they're very close to what's already posted. And then I have some news. This is my last DevCon. I am retiring from FileMaker. Rumors are true. I am retiring next month. Family issues and other stuff going on, and I figured 28 years is probably enough. I was sort of hoping to make it to 30, but 28 and a half will have to do. Thank you. Wow. Okay, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate that. Honestly, though, I want to say thank you. It is the highlight, or one of the highlights of my year, every year, to come and talk to you at DevCon. Not just from the stage, but just to talk to all of you individually and hear what you are doing with FileMaker. Because that is really the greatest thing in the world, is to see all the different things that you are doing with our tool, that in the community that we create together, all the great things we're doing out in the world, all the people who make their living from FileMaker, to me it's just awesome. It is the best thing in the world. And I thank you for that because we all do this together. So no worries though. Like I said, I've got this trainee over here, been working on him for 24 years. But no, seriously, we have a lot of really good engineers, a lot of great work happening in Server and the rest of the platform for Next and beyond. Truly, thank you. I won't be seeing the session evaluation, I don't think. But you can go on ahead and do it because it is useful for all the other engineers who may be doing sessions like this one. And we have a little bit of time left for Q&A. I left 5 minutes, amazing. Please use the microphone.
You mentioned about simplifying the scripts on the server for the PSOS. Does that
Yes.
go if I'm hosting multiple files for different clients, I could just write one script that triggers all the scripts in each of their files? If they're doing some type of auto checking, would that help? Because each client that I host a database for has a different script they want running on the server, but I'm thinking since it runs every 5 minutes, why not just write one script that calls each script? I don't know if that's possible. But
That actually would be a good thing to do. I mean, if you've got a sort of automated process that's every few minutes, that's exactly the thing you could use a server schedule for, right? The server could or the client could create a record with its specific data in that, like a work queue table, and the server schedule could just pick that data up and do the work on behalf of the client. So instead of using, if you have 100 clients, 100 PSOS clients get created, just have one server schedule. That would be the way to go. Absolutely.
I just have a question about the working set on the server and the cache size that you should set. Does that include any container data, or can you just ignore container data, or do you need a bit for the thumbnails?
Well, it depends whether your containers are embedded in the database or they're external.
They're embedded.
Yeah, so if the containers are embedded, they are truly data, right? They're in a separate part of the file. They're in sort of a separate subtree from the record data, so they still get downloaded separately. But they are, because they're in the same database file, they exist in the RAM cache. Yeah.
On one of your slides, you had the word deleted, and you were talking about fields. So just to clarify, if we want to get that zero, no existence of a leaf after one has previously existed, setting the field to empty is the proper way, or setting the field to the empty string. What are the ways we can make sure that that data goes back to being the initial state?
Yeah, setting the field to empty would do it, right? Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it.
John, you understate and do not fully appreciate how much you have meant to this community, how much you have contributed to the success of these products and the construction of a modern platform. We have abused you at times beyond all reasonableness, but on behalf of the community and as the oldest dog in the community, I'm pleased to be able to say, congratulations, we will miss you, but thank you so much for everything you have done for 28 of the 30 some odd years that I've been a part of this community. You have been a stalwart. You have gone when you probably should have stayed home and rested, but we wish you success and good health. And colleagues, I want to call upon you again to stand and recognize Jon Thatcher.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Stephen. But it is a team. I did point out, I was director of engineering for Pro and Server 7, but it was a huge team of people that all made it happen. So thank you.
Fair winds following seas.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Quick question about the RAM cache on the database. Are there any downsides to making it large if you have a lot of RAM on the server? And similarly, anything on the client side, there'd be a problem with the file cache RAM being set a little bit higher.
The only downside of setting the RAM cache really high is it just takes away RAM from other processes on the same machine. So if you've only got the database server on your server machine, then you could set it pretty high. Though do realize that, again, that FMSE process and database server are always on the same machine. I actually had someone last night, again, you hear these things at DevCon. A guy was telling me last night, when they do their first PSOS, the client script it's creating one record using PSOS in the hosted database. The first time it runs, he said it takes like 10 seconds to create a record. And then if they do it hit the button to do PSOS again from that client, it's instant, like it should be. How could that be? And he said, oh yeah, and then if we wait 5 or 10 minutes, it's slow again. My suspicion is that he's got very little RAM on his server, and his database server has a large RAM cache. He said his database server is really busy. My suspicion is that the OS is seeing that the FMSE process is pretty idle, and it just uses virtual memory and takes the physical RAM and puts it back all on database server. So after 5 minutes, when he hits the little button, the PSOS client starts up, and it hasn't been running for 5 minutes. Well, the OS has to bring the FMSE process back into physical RAM in order to start up that PSOS client. And so that's a case where, well, maybe his database RAM cache is too large in the database server. It's sort of starving the FMSE process. Or potentially he just needs more physical RAM. It's hard to know.
I had asked because there had been rumors online about server stability improving if you kept the RAM cache under a gigabyte on the server. And we've got 45 gigabytes of RAM on the server, so maybe we should use more of that?
I personally would say sure. I guess, I can't think of any reason that having a larger RAM cache would be a real problem.
Yes, sir. Thanks. As one of the newer dogs, as the gentleman stated, thanks for everything you've done for us and the progression up until here. With that thought process in mind, thinking of FileMaker Go in a wide area network with lots of users, that's the way we all want to, at least I can envision FileMaker being used. Thanks for describing the tree. And could you just touch on a little bit of best practices in a wide area network with iPhone users on FileMaker Go?
Well, I definitely encourage you to look at my slides from last year because I went into more detail on that whole narrow table idea and actually some other things that are probably applicable to Go. But the big thing to think about is if those Go clients are on a slow network, you need to figure out how to cut down the amount of data that is sent over the network. I mean, that is it's the bottleneck, right? So the narrow tables can be a huge win that way. If you can set up your solution so you've got the critical fields in the one table that's used all the time and larger text fields in a related table, that means those clients only have to download the huge text when they actually need it. And my session from last year is a great place to start. So I don't know whether we need to cut it off at a particular point. Another question or two, maybe? There's sort of, give me a thumbs up, I think. So yeah, 1 or 2 more only.
Okay, so I'll try to make it quick then. With respect to 16 and the worker master, and you've got a firewall and a DMZ, and if you want to run both WebDirect and PHP, does that mean that the master has to have 80 and 443 open to the world as opposed to just open to that worker machine?
It should be only to the worker machine. That's a very good point. They do not need to be open to the world. Well, actually, you may have multiple worker machines.
Right.
Right.
But you can just make multiple workers open just open the firewall ports just to the master, as opposed to opening the master to the world.
Yes. The only caveat there is if you're using progressive download, I think, that requires use of 443, and it's getting the data from the database server. So there, you'd probably have to open it up all the way.
And all the PHP has to be residing on the master machine? You can't put the PHP files on each worker machine?
Well, you can, but I think that they're always the PHP files are gonna be gotten from the master. It's all the other non-PHP files that are part of your solution that need to be on the workers.
Okay,
That's how I understand it.
thank you.
Could you talk a little about the impact of SSDs with your RAM cache settings? We always have internal debates on the SSDs, and I think Clay mentioned that you could keep the RAM cache smaller if you use SSDs on the server.
That is true. SSDs are, so many times faster than spinning hard drives, and of course, people even do RAID using SSDs
we
so
have
to
a lot
get
of
even
customers like that.
even higher speed. But RAM is still faster than SSD. So I personally, if you've got a really heavy-duty solution, I would recommend throwing RAM at it as well as SSD. I definitely SSD first, because you want your databases to be fast. That'll help your backups be fast too, right?
Yeah, essentially, I'm saying just use both SSDs and increase the RAM to get that working set right.
Yeah. But SSD first, and then once you've done that, RAM. Yeah. Unless your boss is, happy to buy lots of RAM and concerned about SSD for some reason. All right, I think we should wrap it up. Thank you very much, and happy trails to all of you as well. I actually added some slides because I knew that I was gonna run too long. Download my slides because there's a little bit more extra material at the very end that I had created but didn't have time for. So a few more performance truths. Thank you.